Well, hello. My name is Sarah McCubbin, and I'm from 10 Minute Momentum. And today I want to talk to you about a, a topic that I kind of stumbled into more out of necessity, possibly out of fear. I don't know. It became kind of an interest of mine as our family started to grow, and that is the topic of how to practice emergency food storage just as a family with your children, just as a lifestyle, that it be kind of incorporated into your life. Now, my husband and I have 9 kids. And so you can imagine that we go through quite a bit of food. And over the last 23 years that we've been married, there have been many, many times where we have used that food. And it has not been because of an apocalypse type thing. It's been just because of normal life stuff. So I wanted to share with you how to go about building an emergency food storage, how to go about practicing that, some of the ways we've done that as a family over the last probably 15 or 16 years. So let me share my screen with you and we will get started. All right. And let's see here. Okay, so here we go. How to practice emergency food storage with your children, because as homeschool parents or just as parents in general, part of what we're talking about here is a life skill, right? We want to teach our kids how to steward what they have, how to use it more carefully. So we're talking about food. So what are we going to cover? We're going to talk about what is emergency food storage, how managing food is a life skill, steps to create emergency food storage, like what do you need to do to have this in your home, foods you might include in food storage, how to include your kids in it, and bonus resources that will help you implement this in your family. All right, so first, what is emergency food storage? I will admit that when we first started down this journey, I was doing it out of a lot of fear. I kind of bought into a lot of the prepper type ideas. I actually don't think those are wrong, but it ended up causing us to pile food in different corners of the house. And we ended up having a lot of food spoilage. So I don't recommend that. I recommend starting off with a more careful, intentional, practical approach towards emergency food storage, because doing this is going to cost you money. It's going to cost you time. You don't want to waste your money just having piles of food. And so let's talk about what a practical approach is. Emergency food storage is intentional stewardship and planning for buying, storing, and using extra supplies of food. All right. Because in most of human history, people have needed to grow and store large amounts of food to get them through the cold winter months. And it's only been in more recent history that people have been able to look at the grocery store, Walmart, Aldi, whatever, as their food storage. But if you've ever been near a grocery store when a storm is coming, you know that those storage supplies are quickly depleted when people have a storm coming, right? Walk into a grocery store right before a storm, there's no milk, there's no bread, there's no eggs, right? The whole store gets quickly picked over with just one storm coming. So it's not really good stewardship to expect that a store is going to have everything we need in an emergency. Now, like I said, this isn't really about a big apocalypse crisis. This is more about managing food for normal life uncertainty. In our case, that has looked like job loss, having unexpected budget items, inflation. Anybody have that right now? Holidays and more, right? Like it is just a way to ride the ebb and flow of life. I'll give you an example. Right now in January, our family has a habit of eating out of the pantry as much as possible for the entire month of January. We will only buy some fresh produce and milk, a few fresh things we will buy. But for the most part, our goal is to simply eat out of the freezer, eat out of the pantry. This serves two purposes. One, it helps our budget recover from the holidays because it's usually hurting a little bit this time of year. And two, when you practice food storage, you actually need to rotate your food supply. And so it doesn't do us any good to have a large supply of food if we don't have a time when we kind of start to eat it down, and then we'll replenish it with fresh things. So on another page, I'll show you our storage or part of our food storage, but we have kind of a lot on hand this time of year, and then we want to eat it down so that we can, fill our freezers with fresh meat, fresh frozen things. Okay. So when we talk about managing food storage, I like to say that this is a life skill, right? You may not need to do this. You may have plenty of money. You may not have a huge yard to grow things in. You may be thinking, do I have to have a garden to do this? No, you don't. Here are 5 areas I've identified around food that are life skills: growing food, food storage, cooking food, hospitality, and healthy eating. Okay, to do food storage, you don't need a garden. And we're not going to talk about cooking or serving or healthy eating. A lot of that will be a byproduct, the healthy eating of food storage, because a lot of these things are more whole foods. But we're just going to focus in on this life skill of food storage. I feel like it's really important to expose our kids to this, even if we don't really need it right now, because I found that there's kind of a learning curve to this. Okay, so if you don't have emergency food storage in your house, here are some ways you can get started with that. First, you're going to choose your storage area and your containers. And some common areas would be your pantry, your closet, your basement, under the bed, right? Depending on your living situation, you might not be able to store a lot. I don't recommend storing it outside unless you have a way to keep it the temperature more even, and to keep animals out of it. I'm not saying 100% that you can't do that, but a lot of foods should not have like huge temperature fluctuations. All right. And containers. What do you use for food storage containers? Well, you're going to see in my pictures that I use everything from canning jars to buckets. I don't know if those are my pictures. I use Ziploc bags. I repurpose like old pretzel containers, or my husband gets like protein powder. I repurpose those. I do buy some food storage containers, but I try not to because I find that they're overpriced. So look around you. Food storage containers are important because you want them to be as sealed as possible, because bugs will get into things, especially like grain. So you want to be able to make sure they're sealable. All right, the next step is to pick 10 common items to start. All right, you're not going to build emergency food storage overnight, but whatever you pick needs to be things that you eat kind of often, right? So they need to be shelf stable for the most part, or freezable, and they need to be things that you eat often, because like I said, you have to rotate your stock. So you don't want to fill your house with foods that your family doesn't eat. Okay, next, we're going to buy in bulk and on sale. And one of the bonus items in this video, or with this video, is a list of 12 ways to buy foods less expensively. Because in order to build up a supply, you actually have to kind of buy more than you normally do. So that involves buying in bulk, buying on sale. I love the Flash Foods app, and I will have a link to that in the in the bonus item. I buy a lot of foods that way. So that's the next step. And then number 4 is rotate your stock and keep adding to it. So you're just going to start small with things that you commonly use, and then you're going to build up over time. So when you see the pictures of mine, this is not what I started with. I have built up over years, and I've kind of adjusted what I keep in our food storage. All right. So I said pick 10. But I've put together a list of foods you might want, things that are really good for using in food storage. So I've got a list of grains, a list of meats, things that kind of fall in the fruits and veggies category, dairy, fat and flavor. That's things like oils, seasonings, sugar, things like that. Again, you don't have to have all of these when you start, because the idea is that we're building a practical food storage so that, like this time of year, I'm going to make a lot of bread because it's way less expensive for me to make organic bread than it is to buy it. So I'm going to use a lot of my grain or my spelt flour up this time of year. I might still have to buy eggs, or I might still have to buy, that's probably the only thing I'll have to buy, but I might have to buy something, right? And just because I don't have everything I need to make a recipe doesn't mean this is useless, right? Buying in bulk is usually less expensive. And of course, it's only useful if you're going to use the items, but this is just a list of ideas of things you might want to get started. Again, you only want to buy things that you would want to use. On my list of meat, I have bouillon. I buy like different bouillon products. They're not my number one. I actually like to make chicken stock or buy chicken stock or beef stock. But when you're thinking about an emergency food storage, that is a product that can kind of make cooking more flavorful, if you will, when you don't have the ideal ingredient. Same thing with like dried milk. Oops. Dried milk is like that. I don't like to use dried milk a lot, but I do keep it on hand more for emergency use rather than daily use. Okay. And I do want to mention over here under the fat category, oil. All right. Oil is one of those things that people kind of have their particular oils that they like to use in cooking. Some oils are more shelf stable. They will last longer. So of course you want to buy oils that you would use, but if you're trying to build up a supply of things that will last a long time and you want to eventually do that, you're going to want to buy things like peanut oil, which has like a shelf life of 3 to 4 years, or olive oil, which has like 3 years. Same with palm. These have longer shelf life, so they won't go rancid. Same thing over here with the grains. Anything that's in a whole grain form is probably fine. It's going to last a while. But like brown rice has a much, much shorter shelf life than white rice. It will go rancid. So same thing with cornmeal. Some cornmeal has a shorter shelf life. So if you move past the stage of like rotating and you're using this up, like you're rotating every few months, then you want to kind of change your strategy to keep some things on hand that are going to last a long time. If you kind of move past the short-term emergency food storage into long-term. Okay, so here's a picture of some of my food storage. And I want to show you this for a couple of reasons. First of all, my basement is not pretty. It's got ugly, nasty tile, and it's not finished. It's not very big, and it's not ideal, right? It's kind of hodgepodge thrown together. And I want you to know that, because when you start this, you might think, well, I've got to have the perfect jars, or I've got to have the perfect space. I can't do this unless I have the perfect whatever. No, that's going to be the wrong attitude to go with this. This is not about having Pinterest perfect picture worthy storage. Okay. So at the top left here, you can see that I have a lot of canned food storage. This is probably like half, well, maybe a little more than half of my canned food storage. And I have canned meat. I have canned vegetables. I have canned, like we buy jams and jellies. I buy those at like discount stores because I make a lot of bread. So again, this works out well when I'm making a lot of bread. Some of this stuff we don't use all the time, but this month when we're eating down our food supply or rotating things, we are going to use more of this. I have, like normal people, I have a refrigerator in my kitchen, but this is not my kitchen. We have an extra refrigerator and 2 freezers. And you might say, well, that's kind of expensive to run. I agree. So we tend to, that little freezer in the middle there, we're going to, as things get eaten down, we'll move the food out of there. We will turn that freezer off, open it up, and we'll kind of like let it sit there while it's not full. We're not going to just run these things with just a little bit of food in them. So we're not using them. We do shut them off because freezers and refrigerators tend to be more efficient when they are pretty full. Over here on the right is some of the beans, rice, and grain. Now, I do have a grain mill, and up here in the top right, you can see this jar that says like protein something. It's like an orange jar. I have spelt berries in there. Now, I don't need to grind grain, but I do. The last time I went to the Amish store, they didn't have enough flour. Spelt berries are much more shelf stable. They'll last a lot longer. So I bought some. I have a grain mill. I can use them. But I generally buy flour. And because I know bugs can get into it, I keep it in sealed containers or my freezer. All right. So I do have bulk grain on there. The middle shelf there is all rice, as is the tub below it on the bottom left. That's all rice. And I just keep it in those cheap tubs. I have not had a problem with bugs getting into my rice, but my mom assures me that they can. So she encouraged me to keep them sealed up. And the bottom right is a big tub of beans. We have several other buckets of dry beans. I generally cook with canned beans, but dry beans are cheap food storage, right? Cheap, cheap, cheap. They last a long time. They don't go bad quickly. All right. Now we're getting close to the end here. How do you include your kids in food storage, right? Like, I don't know about your kids. They're not that super excited about having tons of food. Well, here's how I include mine. We talk about why we have all this food in our house, because we don't have food just in our basement. We do have a pantry and a kitchen that's full. We have food in other places. We talk about why we have food storage. We let them help store, like put the food away when we buy it in large quantities, let them help rotate it when we're filling up our random containers, let them help do it, fill them with the flour, the beans, or whatever. When we're using our food storage, we talk about it. So our kids know that we're not buying a lot of groceries in January because it's kind of our thing. And they know why, because it helps our budget recover. We talk about it. We don't make a big deal out of it because we don't want to cause fear or anxiety or anything like this. We just want them to know that there is a normal ebb and flow of managing money and resources. And this is kind of fun because I buy food at a lot of like Benton Dent type stores. I ask the kids what they want, right? When there's an opportunity to buy something for a good deal, even if it's not a practical canned good type thing, I ask the kids what they want. We also have talked about what they think should be in emergency food storage, which is, of course, hilarious because, be prepared that your kids will want to have some cake or something in their emergency food storage. It's not super practical, but that is an opportunity to talk about what foods are good long-term. It's an opportunity to talk about why we include things like fat and salt and spices, because beans and rice by themselves cooked in water are very boring. But when you add fat and salt and spices, you can make it a lot more interesting, right? So it's an opportunity to just have real practical conversations. Hopefully you'll never have a crisis situation where you need this food, but that's part of the reason to do this. It's a life skill to kind of build your kids' awareness around it. All right. So that's how we build practical food storage. It's an emergency only if you have an emergency. Otherwise, it's just practical. It's a way to write out life. There's 3 bonuses included in this video. One is a pantry inventory, because as you begin, first of all, you need to know the kinds of foods that you eat, right? Like, take inventory of what you have, what you think you eat a lot of. That will help you determine what you should buy. Like I said, beans are cheap, but if you never eat beans, it may not be like one of your beginning items that you buy, right? So again, pantry inventory, that's for you to fill out. I recommend making a separate sheet for each storage area. So like, I have a pantry in my kitchen, but then I have separate food storage in my basement. So use a separate sheet for each area. And that will just help you kind of get more organized. Next, as was in this video, there's a common list of foods that you might want to stock up on. I have that list on a separate PDF as well, and you can add to that list. Maybe there's things that your family eats a lot of. Add to that list to help you kind of think about what you want to put in your food storage. And then last, I have included an article on how to buy food inexpensively. I've become quite good at this. I don't coupon, but I have a lot of other ways that I buy food inexpensively. And I wanted to share those with you in case those are helpful for you when you're building your food storage. Well, I hope this was helpful for you today. I certainly enjoyed sharing it. And I have other videos on this topic. If I can help you in any way, feel free to email me at sarah@10minutemomentum.com. Very happy to kind of give you suggestions or ideas if you're trying to brainstorm how you can implement this with your family, because obviously every family is different. Thanks for joining me today. It was really fun sharing with you, and I hope to see you next time.